Hi, and welcome to The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking to my returning guest co-host and contributor today, Larry Paris. I got to tell you something about Larry's books, The Seven Towers. They are allegorical, and they take these really interesting concepts and put them into realistic settings so you can understand biblical principles. It's called The Seven Towers, and we're talking about the third book in this installment in this series called Can These Bones Live? Now, dear viewer, let me ask you a question. When you think of bones, what do you think? Do you think about your skeletal system? Do you think about animals and their skeletal structure? Or do you think about a graveyard that is covered in shards of bones? When I think of bones, I think of remnants. I think of death. Think of something that cannot be used again because it's at its core. That's all we have left is the bones. And so you may be wondering when I ask the question, can these bones live, what I am referring to? Well, let's go to the Bible real quickly. In Ezekiel, the Lord is showing Ezekiel a valley full of dry bones. And Ezekiel says, Behold, they were very dry. This is indicating that the bones have been there for some time. And so the Lord asks him the question, Son of man, can these bones live? And I think we're going to find out today with Larry's book. As always, we've been showcasing Christian authors now for 12 years. As God gives us grace, we'll continue to do so. If you want to help out, simply go to patreon.com/right stuff. See you can do. And as always, you cover your prayers. We're now on Substack at pjcmedia.substack.com as well as YouTube. We will be expanding to Rumble a little bit later on this year. So really excited to uh, expand our distribution. If you want to help out, simply just subscribe to those channels, and we'll be having more and more shows for you to listen to. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring my guest on board. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Now, I have to tell the viewers something. We met in person for the first time about a year and a half ago at Railmakers. And as soon as I saw him, we gave each other a
Yes.
big hug. And it was so cool to see someone that you talk to online in real life. And it kind of gives you the
Yeah.
idea I am a real person. I do exist. I am not a bot. I am not AI chat box. I am real. And so, what was it like being at the Railmakers conference, real quick, when you were there, Larry?
No, that was so good. It
Hmm.
was exciting to see people that like you said, I've talked to online, friends. I met my editor, and she does a really great job.
Hmm.
Uh, I've got a lot of people that have helped that have done really good. My book covers, if you've seen them, are just fantastic, and
Hmm.
that's Mary Campana Finley. So Railmakers was very good for me. It allowed me to learn some things that I didn't know, and like I say, to meet people that I had never seen before.
I gotta talk about the covers really quickly because when Larry first started writing The Darkened Land, which is the first book in this series, he had very limited funds. And so, like most people, when you have limited funds, you DIY, do it yourself. So he had a cover, and we were all, he said, What do you think of this cover? And he didn't get probably the response he was looking for. And because when I look at it, I said, are they flashlights? He said, no, they're not flashlights. And just people were, I could probably imagine you being upset on the other side of the screen. Like, I worked really hard for this. And then Mary, she was so kind enough to just say, hey, I can do your covers for you and I can do it at an affordable price. And that's literally what happened. And so we want to give Mary a shout out. And we'll let
Oh,
other authors know that if you can do it yourself, you can, but there are people who are willing to work with you. Sometimes you just have to beat the bushes to find out where they are. But the covers are absolutely phenomenal. And now we're on the third cover, the third book in this series, The Seven Towers. Before we get into the third installment, I want you to give us a quick overview without too many spoilers of what the Seven Towers series is all about.
Well, the Seven Towers is set in a world of complete darkness,
Hmm.
and the only light is from stones, which the king gives for those that are entering his service. So we start off with Laclaniel, who is a farmer, and suddenly one day he sees light. He's never seen it before, and he chases it down. It's a man who tells him where he can get a stone. And so the first book is the first half of the first book is his trek to get a stone, to cross the Godwin River and get a stone. And then the second half is because he did this, the enemy is really stirred up and they attack the city by the Godwin River, which is called Agape. And it's just a huge battle. And there are seven people who are helping the city, and Laclaniel is one of those. And then the second book is the Bassiners. Bassiners means tormentors, and it's about the persecuted church, which is a very real thing in our time. The church is persecuted in lots and lots of places.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And so he's sent by the king to help Kara, which means joy, and that city isn't so much under attack like Agape was, but these Bassiners persecute. They capture Christians and they torment them, and it's really bad. And so he has a lot that he has to deal with in the process. And of course, they win the day. The third book goes back to two other characters from the first one, which are Velius and Farrah, who married. That's maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but they married at the end of the first book. And now they're being sent to the city of Pistin, which means faith. And the enemy is attacking there in a different way. He's infiltrated the city and he's spreading despair. And the people of the city are becoming so despondent that they
There you go.
so the city is becoming more and more in despair, and more citizens are dying. And um, Velius and Farah, it's a question of will they fall into despair too when they get there? It's a really bad situation, and Velius is one of the last people in the city, and Leofwine, who is my character of the Holy Spirit, taps him on the shoulder and takes him kind of in a vision out into the country and teaches him some things. That's the excerpt that I'm going to read here in a minute. Um, so it's a place of bones. And when Velius gets there, they're seeing all these slabs and people lying on them, dead bones. And he hears this voice, and he doesn't have any idea what's going on. No, bones don't live. And so this just continues. And finally, he realizes it's Leofwine that's talking to him. So Leofwine takes him out and begins to show him that, yes, dry bones can live.
And I like how you use the allegory about the bones because we see death, but God sees life. He sees opportunity. And for those of you not familiar with where this originates from, go to Ezekiel and you go to the section where he talks about, Son of Man, can these bones live? We also get the song that we go, the foot bone connected to the ankle bone
Yes.
connected to the, all that. And it's based off of that biblical passage. And I say this very bluntly because sometimes there are things in our life that seems like a valley of dry bones. There is no hope and there is no life. And Larry, you have been through sometimes your own valleys of dry bones. And how would you encourage our viewers and listeners about what to do when they reach that place in their life?
Well, um, trust in the Lord is the biggest thing. Um, God does his best work in cemeteries.
I like that.
When it's absolutely impossible, there's no way he can bring it about. And of course, he doesn't always do that. Sometimes it's like Job, he takes everything away from you, but there's a purpose in that. With Job, it was that he had just a little bit of pride left, and God was getting that out of his life. But yes, faith in God, trusting Him, He always does the best thing for us. And there's going to be times when you're in that valley that uh, you just you want to despair. It's there's just no way this can't happen, but it can, and God will get you through it.
There's
Uh,
triumph when you get to that section in Ezekiel because the Lord brings the bones together and creates, guess what? A living army. And
yes,
there is significance in that imagery, whether you choose to take in the biblical sense or just, extrapolate from it. Sometimes we do extrapolate from the Bible and cater some things to our life, not everything, but some things to our life. And I was thinking as I was recalling that passage, is that it wasn't just they became people who were alive, they were an army ready to fight and ready to go forth
yes.
and conquer. And so he created a living army. And I think that's what happens when the Lord rejuvenates you, or if you're Calvinist, regenerates you, if you're Arminian, reinvigorates you. Um, when he does that, he brings you back to life. He brings you back to vitality. He brings you back to living again. And sometimes we do go through the motions. We do, sometimes we're just doing what we're supposed to do because it's by rote. And the Lord doesn't want us to do things by rote. He wants us to do things intentionally and with purpose. Now, does that mean we're always like what we do? Not at all. Not at all.
Yep.
And so I like how you take these biblical principles and you're putting them in fantastical settings to help the reader understand that in your valley of dry bones, the Holy Spirit will raise up something living.
Yes.
It not have to be dead. Now we're going to sit here back and listen to this excerpt by Larry from his newest book, Can These Bones Live, which is available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. And I'll have the link at the bottom of the description of this video. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, Larry, and go ahead, set us up and take us away.
Like I said, Leofwine has tapped Velius on the shoulder, and he's taking him out into this countryside. So Velius jerked awake as the rhythm of the horse's hooves changed. He looked up to a flat, trackless expanse, white and hard. The horse came to a stop, and Velius climbed down. As far as the eye could see in every direction, there was nothing but hard, white ground. He bent down and scratched some of the ground on which he stood. He sniffed it and touched it to his tongue. Salt. He looked about. Leofwine, Leofwine, why am I here? There was no answer. He went to the saddlebags for food for his growling stomach. He pulled out a bag and poured some of its contents into his hand. White powder. He tasted it. Salt. He pulled out another bag and then another. They're all salt. No food. Leofwine, why have you brought me here without food? He got the canteen and took a drink. He immediately spat it out. Salt water. Hang on just a second. My program's having a little problem. Uh, Leofwine, why have you left me here? There was no answer. He climbed back onto the horse and rode back home. He rode all day and into the night, but the white wasteland continued. The morning came, and still there was no sign of an end. At noon, with no end in sight, he brought the horse to a halt and climbed down. He called out again, Leofwine! Leofwine! There was no answer. His mouth was dry and his lips parched. It was hot, but the heat not only surrounded him, it rose from the ground as well. He tried to open his closet, but couldn't. He remembered something he had read in his sword once. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. Why won't you answer me? There was no sound. He listened more intently. Not only was there no sound, no answer, there was no sound at all. He turned to face the horse, but it wasn't there. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He began to walk in the direction, as best he could tell, that they had come from. There was no wind, no sound, no sign of life. The heat was unbearable, and the world began to spin. He collapsed, and the world went black. Velius, can these bones live? Velius raised his head. Salt clung to his face. It was night. His voice was weak and raspy. Live one! Live one! I am here. He stood up. In the east, the light of dawn was on the horizon. Live one! What is this place? A salt flat. There's no life here. Why? There's no water, Leofwine explained. The salt will suck the water and the life out of anything that ventures into this place and remains for very long. A sliver of sun peeked over the horizon. Have you brought me here to die? No, I brought you here to learn. So we see there that uh, the Lord sometimes takes you to a place that seems totally lifeless in order to teach you things that you need to know.
And I love that excerpt, and I love where you stopped at because oftentimes in difficult spots, you want to get out of those difficult spots. No one ever said, hit me with a sledgehammer. Do it right now. No one ever said that. No one wants to be in turmoil because being in turmoil is extremely difficult. But at the same time, there are so many things we learn about ourselves and about the Lord when we are in places of tribulation, sickness, turmoil, betrayal, scandal, whatever it is, there are things that we learn through those hard times that we wouldn't know if we were constantly just given the good, easy life. You referred to Job earlier in our talk we were talking, and Job had a good life. But one thing that
Yes.
doesn't get a lot of credit, I think, with Job is that Job always wanted to make sure that his children didn't take this life for granted. And I
Right.
think that goes to his credit. Now, did he get prideful? Did he get a little self-righteous? Yes, he did. But I don't think we focus enough on the fact that Job recognized that the good life he had was a blessing from the Lord. But that's
Yes.
why when he said, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord." I don't think many of us can do that. We would start to question, like and again, he did. He started to question, but when everything first went down, he was able to say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." And then his friends came, which were great
Yes.
friends, great friends,
Wonderful friends.
wonderful friends. They threw rocks at him, stabbed him in the back, said he was wrong. Great friends. I love the part where Job says, "You are some miserable comforters."
Yeah.
And then I can't I was it I can never pronounce the name. Start for B, I think. He just got to chatting and chatting and chatting. Wouldn't shut up for like eons of paper. You're kind of reading the Job like, please get to the point. You know what I mean? And then
Yep.
and then sometimes when we come through these trials, we want to question God. But God switched it on Job. And
Yeah.
because Job was saying a lot of stuff, and God switched it on him. And the first thing that the Lord told me, he said, stand up, pull your britches up, basically, You're talking a lot of stuff. And the first question you asked him was, where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? And see, me personally, Larry, I would have stopped. I wasn't in there. Let me just stop. Let me stop. I didn't know I mean to ask these questions. But the Lord challenged him because the Lord was letting
Mhm.
him know what was going on, that your ways are not my ways and your thoughts are not my thoughts. I don't depend on you. You depend on me. It's perfectly fine. And there's a lot going on in Job. And that's why we go back to the bones, because again, we see bones, we see remnants of life, we see hopelessness, we see death, and God sees opportunity in life. And
Mhm.
how do we, and I will ask you to answer this question, how do we shift the focus when we are in difficult times that seem like we're in a valley of dry bones? You said we also pray, but how do we get our mindset to match that of the Lord's?
Sometimes that can be really, really difficult. Um, but you have to stay in the Word. Um, in Romans, Paul talks about the renewing of your mind. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the only way that you do that is by taking in the Scripture and just soaking in it. And so that is really an important thing. And talking to the Lord is also, I mean, you have to have the communication from Him, and you have to talk to Him, and uh, it will just transform your attitude. And like I say, there will be dark moments, there will be dark nights. Uh, there were times when I would come home, there is no one here, and it's like, this is just an empty apartment. Why am I here? And it was very easy to allow that to just bring me down totally. But you can't you can't let it do that. You have to stay with the Lord. He will get you through it. You may feel like you're in a forest and you absolutely don't know which way to go, but He is the voice behind you saying, "This is the way. Walk in it."
I love how you said that because, and I'm not going to go into your personal business, but in the past, you have asked us to pray for your select group of people that you talk to. You've asked for prayer because for a while there, I'm not kidding, dear viewer and dear listener, Lear was going through the fire. He really was. And I remember one time you got really discouraged. You just did. You just needed someone to pray with you and to pray for you. Because sometimes when you're down, you're down. And I love the opportunity to be an intercessor for someone who's going through something. And it allows you, the Lord, to use you because right now you can't pray. It's not that you don't want to, but life is really hitting you and you're holding on to your faith. You're hanging on by a thread. And you say, I need someone to help me out right now. And that's okay. I think sometimes that happens because our faith does get stretched. One of the more erroneous sayings that have made it through churchdom, if I can say it that way, is they say God won't put more on you than you can bear. And I used to agree with that, but I don't agree with that anymore. I believe the Lord gives us more than we can bear, because our faith has to be stretched. You can't stretch a rubber band if it's not
It's,
stretched. You can't stretch yourself if you don't go further than what you can go. And so he
mhm.
does give you more than you can bear, because how do you know what you can bear if you're not going past your boundaries?
So there are two things there. One, Paul says that I may know him and the fellowship of his sufferings. You think about Paul, he was beaten with rods, he was stoned, he had all these things that happened to him, but that was all man. And Jesus, the fellowship of his sufferings isn't just, going to the cross, it's life. He came to the tomb of Lazarus, and it says Jesus wept. It says he wept over Jerusalem. He was haunted by the scribes and the Pharisees everywhere he went. There was just a lot of life that Jesus went through as well as the cross. So the fellowship of his sufferings is, it can be persecution, but it's also life that happens.
Amen.
And the second thing is that we talked about prayer, others praying for us and interceding. Paul also talks about the armor of God. And one of the things that he says, and I think he had no analogy for, he had the breastplate of righteousness and the sword of the Spirit, but he says, and prayer for all the saints. That is a big, big weapon. I call it prayer support. It's like in our modern times having planes that come over and just bomb the enemy. You need that. You need other people praying for you. You need prayer support. And in the darkest times, that is a big, big thing. If you are in it and it's just overwhelming to you, you need to talk to your friends and have them pray for you.
Amen. I think we sometimes underestimate the power of prayer. We often say, well, that's the last thing I could do. Well, actually, prayer is the first thing you do, because you're calling on the Almighty in your time of need. I always laugh when I think about the shortest prayer in the Bible, which is, Lord, save me. And that was when Peter was about to fall through the water. He was walking on the water,
Mhm.
and then they always say he looked away from Jesus and got overwhelmed by what was happening around him, and then he started to sink, and then he said, Lord, save me. He called out help.
Yep.
Sometimes we have to be mindful of that. And so, dear listener and dear viewer, you can tell that these sets of books are all about encouraging you in this walk of life, whether you're a believer or not. And I know that you wanted to also appeal to the believer, but also the non-believer can find comfort and words of encouragement in here, because no matter who you are, you're going to go through things. And sometimes your own frail understanding doesn't always add up or match to what you're dealing with. And so these books are for everyone. Go ahead and get your copy today on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. The first book in the series is called The Darkened Land. The second one is The Bassiners, and the third is Can These Bones Live? There's going to be several more, and we'll be showcasing Larry whenever they come out, because he's been working on these for such a long time. Go ahead, support and love my brother today. Now, Larry, in the few moments we have left, I always want to encourage those aspiring authors out there whom God has given the gift to write to pick up the pen and do so. And so we've enjoyed having you today. Go ahead and encourage those authors out there.
God has given you the ability to write, then that's what you need to do, because there are people out there that need to hear the message. And the first thing that you do before you ever touch the keyboard, get on your knees and pray. These books would not be here if I had not had the Lord's help in writing them. Not just the encouragement to write, He's given me things to write that I never would have thought about. I am amazed. I still, when I read through these, I find things I didn't know it was there. He just put in things that um, uh, it just amazes me. So get on your knees and pray, and then put your hands on the keyboard and get busy. That is a really important thing because if you don't sit down and start to write, even if it's worthless, you may think it's worthless. God is doing something. You just keep writing and let the Lord lead you into what is good to do.
I like how you said, get on the keyboard and get busy. I like that because you can't edit a blank page. You can
True.
edit a page full of worthless words if as you said, but you can't edit a blank page. So get some words on there. Do the dang thing, as I say. Just go ahead and do it. One of my rallying calls when I'm actually writing and I put my writing goals online sometimes to keep myself accountable to others. I always say, write the words, all the words. I always say that because if you don't write all the words, you can't edit any of them. So you have to get writing and just do this thing called writing. So, Larry, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
And we were talking to Larry Paris. He is the author of the book Can These Bones Live, which is book 3 of the Seven Towers series. The first two books in the series, The Darkened Land and The Bassiners, are also available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Go ahead and love on my brother today. This is a work from the heart. He has been working on this for quite some time, and now it's here. I remember when he first published The Darkened Land, just how big of a milestone it was. And then he had to pull it down and get it re-edited again. Get it re-edited again because there were some things that were missed and just the journey of learning how to be a better author. But you can't be a better author if you're not putting anything out there. So go ahead, pick up the pen and write stuff. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J, and you have a wonderful, absolutely glorious, blessed day.